Hello there, everyone. Welcome to Cybersecurity Agony Uncles. I'm Uncle Rich, and I'm joined by Uncle Ross today.
Hello, I'm Uncle Ross. I'm stepping in for a second while Stephen's out. Excited to be here talking with you guys. I listen to every one, so it's very cool to be part of.
Oh no, you're very welcome. Glad to have you with me today. So, what are we today? We are July the 2nd, Cybersecurity Agony Uncles. And we've got a good question that's come in this month. Ross, take it away.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. So the question we've had, we are getting closer to launching our product. And as a startup without a dedicated security team, it's tough to know which external security services or consultancies we should actually invest in before go live. From your experience, how do you figure out what's really worth doing at that stage? And how do you tell the difference between good vendors and the ones just selling buzzwords, of which there are plenty?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess we'll have to make some assumptions here about what sort of startup they are. It's clearly going to be, a technology startup.
Yeah.
We're unlikely to have heard from them. But I guess with all things, context is king, right?
Yeah, exactly. Obviously we don't know what kind of tech startup they are, but let's just make the assumption that it's generic tech in a non-regulated sector, and they're just trying to do the right thing, I suppose.
Yeah, and I guess that the path that they go down probably depends a bit on whether it's like a SaaS product or whether it's something that's designed to be on-prem appliance-based, or local software that's running on people's computers. But the fundamentals are all the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if they were in a regulated industry, obviously they'd include that in the question. But also, regulated industries come with regulations, funnily enough. But they act as guardrails.
Yeah.
So what standards you got to meet, what you got to adhere to. So I don't think they would be asking this question if they were regulated. So assuming they are sort of and I hate to use the term generic because it's not a one size fits all, but a generic SaaS business, if you understand my meaning.
Yeah.
Then we've got to be looking at best practices, really, and just following the standard mold. Just like there's a standard mold for the whole design through to development through to testing process.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity for SaaS does follow a certain well-trodden path.
I guess there's two main areas, I guess, that I would be looking at, and one of them is very much about the business and your sort of posture as a business in terms of how secure you are with the tooling that you use for your everyday work, your people, your practices, and then there's the product, and it's kind of two separate areas that overlap, but they both, I think, merit investigating and spending some time thinking about.
Totally. I mean, cybersecurity is a business problem. It's not a tech problem as such.
Yeah.
So I would start by evaluating risk within the business. Where are your crown jewels? What's a risk to them? The difficulty is if you've never done a risk analysis or built a risk register before, a lot of the time you won't know where to start.
No, that's true. I mean, the other side of that is that sometimes when people who've not done it before get presented with fill out this risk register, everything goes onto it because, quite rightly, everything is a risk, right? But it's knowing where to sort of cut that line and say, oh, do you know what? Actually, that's not something that needs to be on the risk register, or it can be a low risk and it's just something that's there for observability going forward. But yeah, totally agree with you. It's really hard to know where to start if you've never done it before.
Yeah, I mean, assuming they've got some smart people on board, and don't get me wrong, evaluating risk is actually very much its own skill in and of itself. But with smart people on board who can ask the right sorts of questions, that can get you a long way if you're just starting with a risk register template and guessing what goes in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's quite a lot of free guidance out there, some of it better than others, right? So the NCSC obviously have got the cyber assessments framework stuff, which is probably a bit heavy-handed. It's probably a bit. It depends kind of on where the business is coming from and how much money they've to start this business up and what the sort of projected uptake is. But there are things like the CAF that exist to kind of guide you through the processes of figuring out where you are at the moment and where you need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, alternatively, you kick it all over the fence to a managed security services provider.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, not to be a sales pitch, but it's something that lots of companies that have cybersecurity consultancies do, sort of cyber maturity assessments and gap analysis and that sort of thing. It's all worth speaking about and saying, if you've got the ability to, then it's probably going to be easier for you as a startup to say, do you know what, we can kind of hand off some of the responsibility of knowing where to get started and what direction to go in to a third party, which is clearly something they're thinking about doing, because they say, how do you tell the difference between good vendors and the ones that are selling buzzwords?
Yeah, God, that I've got to be careful here before I go on to a rant about snake oil in the industry.
Yeah.
And I've said it before in the cybersecurity agony uncles, that the cybersecurity industry, in terms of snake oil vendors, is very much where IT was sort of 20, 25 years ago.
Totally agree.
It's like the Wild West out there. And how can you tell?
Yeah, I mean, it's an acquired skill, isn't it? If you've been around the industry for a while, then you start to spot patterns. Who's actually worth talking to and who is just a sales team with a tiny little department trying to do the actual service provision. But it is tough. I mean, generally you can spot it with written stuff quite easily. If you're reading a synopsis of what a business would offer or what the service offers, you can quite often pick up if there's any substance and they care. It's looking for kind of doing that arty thing of looking for passion in the content, not just a list of words, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're looking at vendors and all their content is generated by robots and optimized for SEO and things, but it's losing a lot of the meaning, then they might not be the vendor for you.
Yeah, and I think most good vendors as well, like thinking about the fact that these guys are startups and there's not necessarily a wealth of experience there. Most good vendors will make people who don't have a lot of experience feel comfortable in talking about what they might need. Good vendors won't try and just bamboozle you by saying a load of 3-letter acronyms and hoping that makes them sound good. They will take the time to talk to you once you've engaged them about what your requirements might be. There are good ones out there. Like, I don't want to come across as everyone's rubbish, it's TSC or nothing, because it's not true. There are good ones out there. But certainly I think the approach that we take and other good vendors take is conversational. It's not just, here's a packet of stuff that we do. There's a bunch of acronyms in there. You might not understand what's going on. Buy our services off the peg, please. It's like an engagement where you say, what do you do? Let's talk about your business, and go from there. And I think that's a pretty common pattern that good vendors will follow.
I was just thinking about it, and there's that old saying, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. So translating that concept from IT to cybersecurity, nobody ever got fired for hiring the Big Four.
No.
However, there is a caveat with that. You pay for the A team, you get the C team when it comes to the Big Four.
Yeah.
And if you've got tons of Series A, B, C, whatever funding, you might think that's the best thing to do. Just go with the biggest names in the market that you've heard of.
Yes.
However, you don't always get the best value that way. You'll get the biggest invoice, absolutely.
Yeah.
But you won't always get the best value. It won't always be completely tailored to you. They won't get to know you as a business. You'll just be a number to them.
Yeah. I think part of what feeds into that is like insurance requirements, right? If you've got insurance as a business for sort of cyber risk, sometimes it feels like the only way to address the requirements of that insurance to make sure that your policy is not void is to just say, we'll spend all of the money. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I think it can make people feel that way, but I think if you do a bit of critical thinking about what the requirements actually are for your policy, then you'll find that so long as they're met by your vendor, and every vendor will want to try and meet those for you, right? So if you say, look, this is requirements based at this point, we've got to make sure that we don't invalidate a policy, vendors will talk to you about how they can best meet that. It's sometimes the long way round, but if it means that you save a lot of money, then it's probably worth it.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, I've worked in small SaaS startups before, and I think what would have benefited them probably the best is finding an MSSP that offers a very much a partnership based approach.
Yeah,
where you're more than just a number, where you feel like they care for you and have your best interests at heart, rather than just using you as a cash cow and extracting money every month.
Yeah.
So I would be looking for a vendor that's willing to be open and transparent in initial conversations.
Yeah.
Maybe take on a couple of small engagements first to see how you get on with them, see what level of engagement they provide.
Yeah, absolutely.
And kind of build from there. I don't think when you're taking on a new vendor, you need to jump straight in with a great big engagement.
No, that's true. I mean,
be tied in for years or whatever. I think a bit of caution doesn't hurt, especially when it's something as serious as cybersecurity, especially in a SaaS environment.
Yeah, I mean, if you found a vendor that you're getting a good vibe from, I suppose for this company, doing something like scope a pen test, but a fairly minor, pick an area of the software that you want to pen test or an area of the infrastructure you want to pen test, and go to a vendor that offers that amongst other security services and see how that's handled. If you're not getting good before care, you're not getting good after care, then that probably tells you all you need to know about the vendor for their other products and services, and you can kind of help make that decision based on how they react to that small piece of work. I think that's really good advice, actually. Start off small with a vendor rather than putting all your eggs in the basket.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a vendor will sell you the moon on a stick, anything you want, quite probably. But the big question is, can you live with them on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah.
Can you work with them?
Yeah.
And obviously, beyond that, are you getting the outcomes, the improvements to your security posture that you wanted or needed from the outset?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
And measuring some of this stuff can be really tricky.
Yes. Yeah, ROI on security is really, really tough, right?
Oh, God, it's a bitch. It really is.
What's the success metric? We haven't been hacked yet. Cool.
Yeah. Is that because you've accidentally turned the router off in your cupboard for the last month?
Exactly.
Or is it because your security program's working?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's very hard to prove a negative.
Yeah. But the positives do bring it into sharp contrast. You quite often hear of large engagements happening with companies directly after they've been hit by a ransomware attack. It's one of those things that I think some money people don't think they need until they really need it.
Yeah, and I mean, there is an argument to say that investing in cybersecurity is very much like paying for insurance, but I disagree in some respects. Cybersecurity should be, in theory, a business enabler. In a B2C context, it can help you win the trust of new customers or win new customers via being able to answer affirmatively in security questionnaires or having ISO 27001 accreditation or whatever.
Yeah.
But the whole concept is that it allows the business to deliver on its goals safely.
I guess on that as well, some advice that I know you've given people, and we've all given businesses before, especially if they're small, and I don't know the scale of this startup, but especially if you're a small startup and you have limited budget to spend on external vendors, making use of what you've already got and doing the sensible things first is, to me, as good a starting place as any. Making sure that the RBACs for your emails and your your work management platform's good, making sure that you've got password policies and that you've got a password manager and all those really basic things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've probably done ourselves out of a substantial amount of money's worth of business over the years by actually going and delivering talks on exactly that. So one of the ones I did, who was it for? I can't remember now. Anyway, it was quite a decent talk with a decent audience around getting cybersecurity basics right.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was things like check your firewalls, implement MFA. It's just basic cyber hygiene tips, and they doing the basics right and looking at what you've already got and implementing the security settings around that can actually get you a long way.
Yeah.
And people don't realize it.
No, and also it's the best use of your money, right? And I don't mean that just as in it's free because you're already paying for it, but I mean it as in if you go to a pen tester before you've done that and say, have a go with a wide scope, the likelihood is that the first half of the report is going to be all those simple things that you should have done anyway. You may as well get the best value for your third-party services by making sure that you've ticked all that stuff off out the gate before you start engaging people.
Yeah, hitting those baselines. It means that your MSSP has got less to do to start with.
Yeah, totally.
And less to do to start with means you're spending less money.
Absolutely. And I mean, if you've got a pen tester for 2 days and they're finding all of this low-hanging fruit, then that's using up their time. If you give them 2 days and you've nailed all that low-hanging fruit out, they might get really deep and find some things that might have been difficult to achieve within the context of the time period they've got, had they just been wading through all of the basic things to tick off. So I think...
Yeah, that's it. I mean, in terms of a SaaS environment, let's just, for the sake of argument, say they're using GitHub, they're building something that's got a load of JavaScript or TypeScript dependencies and things. In terms of advice there, check the permissions on the org in GitHub, check that your dependencies aren't out of date.
Yeah.
And you just need a process around that to check these things. Not necessarily even every sprint if you're stuck in agile hell.
Yeah.
But it needs to be there. You need to keep these things up to date.
Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the software development lifecycle.
Go for it.
Well, it's not I'm not in that world particularly anymore, but I was at one point a developer, and there are a lot of very simple things that you can implement in the process of your software development lifecycle that can have big impacts. And one of those is like static analysis, right? There's a bunch of free open source static analysis stuff that you can chuck in as part of your build pipeline or part of your merge pipeline to master or main now, is a very good idea. Make sure we're not introducing any known vulnerabilities straight off the bat. And you can do all of that stuff and shift left as hard as you can with all of that stuff, without having any real impacts on the amount of time that it takes devs to do work, which obviously is a startup is that's king in lots of ways, right? It's getting the software iterated on quickly so that it can be out the door and making you money as quickly as possible. So there are loads of tools to do that. GitHub's obviously got Dependabot as well, which you touched on there, which will just check all of your package dependencies and say, do you know what, that node package is out of date? And it'll automate that. It can even automate pulling that package update in to your unstable testing branch, for example. So there's a lot of options out there as devs. If you get in a slightly kind of SecOpsy, DevOpsy mindset as you're looking at your build pipelines, that really there's not really any excuse not to do. It doesn't take long to implement them. It's not particularly complex. And as I say, you shift a lot of that responsibility left and keep the momentum of the development lifecycle that you need.
Yeah, and as we said earlier, this is a well-trodden path. So there are tons of resources online to help you do that. Guidance from other people. If I don't know, you can even ask the robots over at ChatGPT.
Yeah, totally.
This stuff is so well-trodden that and so well known that the guidance is just literally at your fingertips. So you can absolutely start with that. What else we've got in the question?
We've got some stuff there about buzzwords and spotting buzzwords, and something that I wanted to address there, and this is quite delicate, is that not all technical not all technical jargon are buzzwords. They have some meaning, and there's a certain amount of just learning lexicon with any area, especially in technology, which is unavoidable. I've written about this before, and like overuse of TLAs, 3-letter acronyms, kills the understanding of a piece of written work for sure.
Yeah.
But no one is going to refer to DNS as anything but DNS, right?
No.
There's a certain amount of you just have to learn it. And I appreciate that that's not always what people who don't have much exposure to cyber or tech want to hear, but it's there for a good reason. It's a common linguistic shortcut that people in the industry need to know, because doing it another way is a waste of words. So there is just an element of, it's a thing, it's there, you do have to learn some of the lexicon. I get what they mean by buzzword bingo. To me, that's more stuff like powered by AI. I'll try not to get into a massive conversation with you about that and bore people to death, but there's a good amount of that going around in cyber. Powered by AI, SOAR, automated response as an extension of SOAR. All of that stuff, which does feel very soupy.
Yeah.
And it's when the acronyms start to not mean the things that they're actually about that they become buzzwords to me. In the same way that AI is a buzzword because it's not actually artificial intelligence that we're talking about. We're talking about large language models and agents is what we're talking about. And automated, SOAR, but it's not exactly what it says on the tin isn't exactly what it is. So therefore it becomes a buzzword. Or there's lots of different ways of interpreting it as well. That's the other reason that something becomes a buzzword to me.
Yeah, just going off on a tangent because you made me think of something. A perfectly valid approach to starting cybersecurity from scratch is to actually think about what you would do in an incident and work backwards. As in, let's imagine we had an incident. What are the steps we'd have to go through in order to recover from that? What would we need? And then start putting them in place. So your usual thing is what? Detect, contain, eradicate, and recover.
Yeah.
Right? So you think, what would I need in order to detect an incident? Do we have some kind of security visibility platform?
Yeah.
If not, should we get one? How would we eradicate? Do we have, I don't know, antivirus or endpoint protection of some kind? Do we have the ability to destroy and spin up new web servers that are clean? Things like that. Worth thinking about. And then recovery, do we have plans for it? DR and BC plans and all of that stuff. And if you can work out what's commonly done, translate it to what's needed in your business, you can start to fill in those gaps, and you can absolutely engage an MSSP to do that as well.
Yeah, I mean the observability thing.
Oh, we're big on that, obviously.
Yeah, I was going to say for me, obviously, it stands out as being something that's really important. But without trying to be biased about it, you cannot possibly preempt an adversary if you can't see what that adversary is doing.
Yeah, I mean, I say this about a lot of things. If you can't measure something, you can't manage something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that goes from managing people to managing tech, to managing a cyber incident.
Yeah.
I think it's almost a universal rule. If you can't see it, how do you deal with it?
Absolutely. And obviously there are a load of paid for options there as well, including letting an MSSP handle it for you. But down at the really low end, there's a lot of free open source tooling that you can use. You can set up yourself as well if you need to start small because of your budget requirements. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't deserve to have observability. So there are platforms out there that you can wrangle for near enough free to get you some level of observability. And in my book, having some level of observability is better than having none. So even if that's quite basic, do it. Even if it's turning on log streams in AWS, it's something. You can query that.
Yeah, I mean, to start with, your logs don't even need to be centralized, but you do need to know where they are,
Yeah.
and they do need to be turned on.
And they need to be meaningful as well, right?
Oh, God, yeah. The last thing you want is to be drowning in logs so you can't see the wood for the trees.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, thinking about security logging, with or without some sort of aggregation platform or a SIEM, as long as you're thinking about it and knowing how you would detect any kind of breach or issue, I think that's half the battle.
Yeah, and it'll lead you down the path, right?
It will, yeah.
I guess the other thing worth talking about is scoping as a very abstract concept, but you need to look at what's likely in your business to happen to cause a breach or to cause an incident. And you're kind of talking about your frameworks for figuring out what your most likely threat actors are or what their patterns are going to be, and there's plenty of those, MITRE, etc. And that's probably not a bad place to start as well.
Yeah, and here's a thought about SaaS businesses. They are so obsessed with their customer-facing web services, whatever they may be, that they'll be worried about malicious threat actors attacking their websites, their e-commerce platforms, whatever they've got, their apps, their APIs, whatever, right? However, more often than not, the biggest risk is from somebody with some kind of admin level permission or whatever, accidentally clicking on a phishing link.
Yeah.
And it tends to be your internal users.
Yeah, or alternatively, someone walking in the front door with a high vis, right? It's those kinds of vectors that tend to catch people out more than...
Oh, yeah, totally. You have to question, why is my small-scale SaaS startup considering nation-state attackers, when actually it's more likely to be Sally in accounts who's clicked a phishing link?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
So training, I guess we're talking about here now, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
Going round to that topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Awareness and training.
Yeah.
Incidentally, I have a moral problem with a lot of phishing simulation tests and things like that.
Yeah.
There was a horrific one that said that the company had that. It said something along the lines of, "You're getting a bonus. Click here to find out how much." Spoofed from their HR. Oh, and that's just cruel.
It is.
I mean, that's horrific.
Yeah, it's awful. I totally get the kind of imperative from the cyber end of things to say we need this. This is a really effective tool to use to train people, but there are much better ways of doing it than that, and actually better than simulation quite often. I think if you haven't engaged someone before there's a simulation, you're setting them up to fail, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
You've got to engage the people about what could happen to make the simulation even worth doing, in my book. And that is a challenge because people are hard, right? It's hard to get through to people who struggle to see why they should care about phishing emails, for example, or why MFA is important. And
well, let's be honest, MFA is bloody annoying at the best of times.
Exactly. It's especially when it causes friction, like MFA or to a certain extent password managers. I mean, how many times a day do you swear at your password manager for logging you out?
Oh, God, yeah.
But it's doing exactly what it's designed to do, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And we all know it's important. None of us would be writing, a Word document with passwords in it because we get it. But it is breaking that pattern and saying, I know it's a bit of friction, I understand that, we can reduce that friction as much as possible, but there's always going to be some. But here's why it's important. And sometimes you do need a third party to come in and say, we've seen this in the wild. We've seen someone leave a pen drive with a Word document with passwords on it on a bus. These are stories from the real world. And I think more often than not, it's that level of engagement that really grabs people and makes them think twice. I know the police have got quite a big department that's dedicated to this, right? They go around and kind of share horror stories. And I've seen that at B-Sides Bristol. There was someone from Cyber Crimes Unit there talking about what they do in terms of education. So there are free resources out there as well, or cheap resources. You don't necessarily need to say come in and do a tabletop exercise, but also tabletop exercises are really cool.
They are really cool in all fairness. Yep, we do like a TTX, absolutely.
But I guess really, as a smaller business or a startup, that is probably where I'd focus a good deal of my early cybersecurity effort, is training people and getting the basics of what tools you've already got nailed down.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the risk of sounding wrong, dumb, or stupid, a lot of the bigger stuff can wait until the SaaS grows, until there's been another funding round, or there's more users and they've got a bit more liquidity, because one of the things with cybersecurity is that it's a marketplace full of tools. There's a tool for every problem, and tools for things that aren't problems as well, funnily enough. Going back to the whole snake oil thing again.
For problems,
So, and a lot of it's really bloody expensive. There's no doubt about it. So you've got to think about the cost benefit side of it. And doing the basics is often free or cheap.
Yeah.
So it's from a financial standpoint a good place to start, but it makes sense anyway for other reasons that we've already talked about. But yeah, you don't need the most expensive thing if you're a startup of 5-10 people.
No.
Necessarily. You don't need the latest shiny tool.
No, categorically not. And that is the risk as well of trying to put that in. If you go to an investor and say, oh, we're going to need £1 million because we've got a bunch of tooling that we need to put in to be secure, the danger is that that tooling gets approved, gets put in, and you still have problems. And then when you need more tooling as you grow, you really struggle to get the funding for it or the sign off for it.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that the cybersecurity maturity should keep pace with, rather than racing ahead of, the business maturity.
Yes.
Because otherwise you're on a hiding to nothing. Now, that's not my quote by any stretch. Stephen said that. He's far smarter than I am. So, but yeah, he's totally right. You want it to keep pace with where the business is at.
Yeah.
Rather than racing ahead and locking everything down and monitoring absolutely everything and paying hundreds of thousands of pounds a year on cybersecurity if the business doesn't actually warrant it.
Yeah, totally. Obviously, as we've already said, there are exceptions to that with controlled industries and stuff. But yes, fundamentally, I agree with you. Is there any point in worrying about post-quantum encryption in your 5-person startup that does a SaaS platform that takes notes? Probably not. You probably don't need to concern yourself. And I get the context sort of from this question that even figuring that out can be tough if you're not in that world and you're not rubbing up against it all the time.
Now, I'm about to plug one of our services, but it doesn't have to be from us. There's lots of ways to skin a cat. Lots of people out there who can provide this service, or you can roll your own if you've got the skills. But one of the things we do is a threat actor report. So who do we think are actually going to attack a customer's business? And that can be valuable because that sort of gives you some indication of what you need to guard against, where they're from. I mean, if you are a UK company targeting UK only customers, just block everything that comes from certain other countries that are on your list, in terms of traffic.
You might get a few support tickets for people who've got VPNs dialed for watching their Netflix in America, but that's much better than the exposure, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. A little bit of geo-blocking never hurt anyone. And again, that's probably free to do on your cloud provider of choice.
Or very cheap.
Yeah, or very cheap. Yeah. Most of these things like that tend to be pretty cheap. So, it's one of those things, and a threat report will tell you who your main concern should be aimed at, which threat actor groups. Are they big nation state actors? Are they small groups? Is it because of the sector you're operating in or your location? Is it because there's a risk with supply chain stuff. Are you supplying to some massive companies that are actual targets in their own right? I mean, actually, supply chain attacks are a hot topic right now, aren't they? Given the latest big breaches in the retail space are actually through the supply chain.
Yeah.
I'm being careful not to name companies. But incidentally, whilst I've been covering the daily cyber briefing, Scattered Spider, who were responsible for the retail stuff recently, have moved on to airlines.
So I'm told, and I'm told that there may be a supply chain link there also.
Yeah, so that might be a sign of things to come. So yeah, start thinking about supply chain attacks as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess supply chain is really difficult though.
Oh yeah.
But also on the flip side of that, doesn't tend to be as important until you do get to scale. So again, it kind of tracks with that business maturity kind of angle.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a fair bit of context there. I guess the last thing that I would say, because we get a relatively high number of questions that all come with the context of we don't know where to start with X, is that as much as the community can sometimes have a bit of a reputation for being curmudgeonly, there are a lot of community groups and community interests that are very friendly, and I've been to a lot of them. I'm relatively new to cyber. I should probably have said that up front. This is only really my second year being directly involved. I've been tangentially involved tons in the past, working for IT healthcare providers and stuff like that. So you kind of rub up against compliance a lot and all of that kind of thing. But this is my first cyber job, really. So I came in knowing not very much, but went to a B-sides in Bristol as a pretty fresh person and understood a lot of what was going on from the technical point of view and had loads of insights and chatted to loads of really good people. There's loads of just groups on LinkedIn and on Twitter and, follow the hacker communities. It's all there. It does take a bit of engagement, but you can glean an awful lot and you can get your foot in the door with cyber relatively easily, even compared to some other technical industries. So do just look for what's out there in terms of people.
Yeah, that's it. I found the cyber community to be a totally welcoming and very open sort of bunch of people. Yeah. I think most people in cybersecurity, especially at an ops level, rather than selling into cyber, software vendors selling in or whatever, I think they tend to be in it for the right reasons.
Yeah,
which means that on the whole, they're a decent bunch of people, and going to a few events it wouldn't be a bad shout, even if you're not in cybersecurity. So you can actually just talk face to face to a whole bunch of people. You might meet some vendors, you might meet some of your peers, other people in the SaaS industry, SaaS businesses, and they can tell you what they do, and you get to make a day of it, and you might come away with a few new ideas and a few new contacts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because of the type of industry it attracts a lot of us, by which I mean nerds with special interests.
Oh, yeah.
And one thing that nerds with special interests love to do is talk about their special interests to other people and try and invigorate other people about them. So
absolutely,
I've rarely found that I've struck up a conversation with somebody at one of these events or about cyber or about the sort of more techie engineering stuff that I do, where they don't want to talk your ear off about it. There's plenty of conversations to be had with plenty of knowledgeable people, and that's free. And people are willing to give up their time, generally speaking, to chat if it's at an event that warrants it, or in a context that warrants it, without trying to sell you stuff, because we're just interested in it,
Absolutely. Okay, so right, to wrap up this this session, so you want to do the basics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at all your settings, see what you can do. You want to engage with the community a bit if you want some sort of one-to-one advice and just get to know a few people and what the general do's and don'ts are with cybersecurity. Find yourself an MSP, an MSSP who you feel you can work with and who don't try to blind you with tons of jargon and waffle. Plain English always helps, especially when talking about difficult concepts or new concepts, look to build a risk register potentially, or to at least understand what the risks to your business are. And then gradually over time, snowball. Maybe start small with an MSSP as a small engagement and build up, and go from there. You're not trying to build Rome overnight, so to speak.
Yeah.
Make sure your cybersecurity is appropriate for the maturity of your business as well.
Yeah, totally. And I think if you're asking these questions of yourself, you're already in a good position, because there are plenty of startup founders and people who've got no experience, and they don't know the question to even start asking. So the fact that you're already thinking about it that's a good sign. It's never too late to think about it, but the fact that you're doing it before your product's in the market is actually a lot better than some companies do. So pat yourself on the back for that.
Yeah, exactly. Kudos for that. Asking questions is actually always the first step. So you're already on the path. So go for it. Okay, right. That will do for this month. We'll be back next month with another episode of Cybersecurity Agony Uncles. I've been Uncle Rich.
I've been Uncle Ross.
Thank you very much.